Good DMs are a treasure to be prized that can make playing D&D a genuinely life-changing experience. However, bad DMs can, and have in the past, stopped people from getting to play D&D to its full potential. Red flags can be an early indicator that you should run and not look back, or advise them on how to be better. I don't know, I'm not your mum. But here's my red flags to find out whether you need to stay in a group or turn tail and get out. I'll start with my personal pet peeve for Dungeon Master red flags: railroading. For the uninitiated, railroading is where the party have no agency in the game. Their actions and reactions don't matter because the DM has a preconception of where the party will go and what they will do. These DMs allow for very little, if any, wiggle room outside of their predetermined path, much like a train on a railroad. A DM that railroads removes all power from their players, reducing them from the main characters of an interactive and collaborative storytelling experience to what essentially amounts to NPCs in the Dungeon Master's storybook. A telltale sign that you're being railroaded is if your DM never asks, "What would you like to do?" and instead says, "You do X, Y, or Z." As a rule of thumb, only you should say what your character does. Your DM just describes the outcome and reactions of the world around you. Metagaming is usually a term reserved for player characters. It's when a player uses information that is beyond their character's knowledge. Things such as the sorcerer using fire spells on a troll to stop its healing factor, even though they've never encountered one before. Not because they know that, but because the player has read the monster manual. DMs are the arbiters of the world, so they need to know everything that's going on to say how the world reacts. But they can still effectively cheat. Say the players are planning a strategy that takes advantage of a glaring weakness of a band of orcs, such as the fact that none of them are currently carrying any ranged weapons, so they'll attack from afar. A good DM would reward that by having the satisfaction of absolutely owning a fight due to clever planning, but a bad DM would suddenly equip the orcs with bows to counter the player's moves. Metagaming. Homebrew can be a really exciting way to mix up the traditional D&D gameplay, insert some new ideas, and really make a campaign your own. While there's a great collection of really fantastic homebrew rules, worlds, and content, finding things that are balanced and fun to play alongside as a player or DM is like trying to find a needle in a haystack. A good DM is incredibly selective of the homebrew that they introduce, and for good reason. If one player has a homebrew made by Little Timmy, the 11-year-old, called Vampire Werewolf God Barbarian subclass that gives you a +20 to attack and damage rolls from level 3, then you're going to have a bad time, especially if you're anybody but Timmy. DMs need to read and understand any homebrew that they try to introduce and consult the rest of the party for agreement before introducing it. That's not to say that all homebrew is bad or shouldn't be included, but if you go to a session and see tons of homebrew, take a moment to carefully look at what's been included and whether it's something that would help or hinder your enjoyment. Session 1 should never be the start of a campaign, contrary to what the numbers suggest. Every single game should start with a Session 0, an opportunity to discuss the themes of the game, triggers that players may have, soft and hard boundaries to put out into the open, and to introduce any safety tools that you use to make sure the players and the DM feel safe. It's a non-negotiable. And if you're introduced to a D&D game and hear, "Nah, we don't do a Session 0, I'm too experienced," or "We're all friends, so we don't need a Session 0, then you should run for the hills. Natural ones, in and of themselves, are some of the most memorable moments in D&D. Nothing can get a group of players cackling like someone coming up with an epic idea, hearing "roll for acrobatics," and then watching the dice roll and land on that foreboding one. On the surface then, having a selection of results on a table seems like a good idea, but in practice, it can be clunky and unforgiving. Often you have to roll percentile dice, then look at the fumble table, then narrate the results word for word. These fumbles can range from falling over, hitting yourself, and even just flat out losing limbs on a bad roll. As a player, this can go from being a really funny moment to being unconscious for the rest of the encounter, or having your character be permanently disfigured. It slows the pace of the game down. The results often don't match the action. They can suck the enjoyment out of the game by being excessively punishing. We all know the stereotype of the rules lawyer. Every single time a ruling comes up, they quote the page, line, and exact wording it's written in a handbook. Sometimes this can be really frustrating for a DM, and thankfully, Rule Zero exists to ensure that the game isn't taken too far off topic by debates. On that note, however, is the DM that never allows for a player to express their understanding and perception of the rules. Sometimes a player will have an interpretation of what they were trying to do that doesn't quite mesh with what the DM expects. And that's a time where the DM should be open to these different interpretations within reason. A DM that shuts down any input from their players is not one that is going to have enjoyment at the forefront of their mind. And you may well find yourself becoming frustrated at the fact that things only work the way that your DM wants them to work, to fit within their view. The table should be a safe place where you can ask for things to increase your enjoyment in the game. And if the DM doesn't even allow you to try, then it might not be the best table for you. On the other hand, a DM needs to sometimes be the arbiter of the rules and lay down the rule. If a DM always rolls over and lets the party go far and beyond what the rules and their interpretations dictate, then balancing flies out the window. And you might as well be playing pretend in the playground without the guidelines of these rulebooks. A 45-minute debate about rules, or a player using the fireball cantrip to level a city isn't fun nor balanced. And that's the time where a DM should have the confidence to use Rule Zero and get the game moving again in the right direction. Like with anything, this is a balancing act for a DM to learn over time. But if you see a DM that lets everything go and loses the constraints on power and balance, it's worth looking elsewhere. Just because the DM sits behind the screen and the players in front does not mean that D&D is a competitive game of players versus DM. It's a collaborative role-playing game. The DM isn't an enemy. They're a narrator of the story for the players to use alongside, not a boss for them to overcome. The best DMs are on the side of the party, and the NPCs and enemies exist not to beat them, but to present challenges along the way of their epic adventure. The mentality of beating the party can easily be seen by having unfair enemies, targeting squishy characters, and just obviously an intelligent opponent would be likely to target the backline. And simply lying about damage or attack rolls. This is an incredibly hostile and unfun way to play D&D, and if you notice this happening in your encounters, I'd recommend dipping out ASAP. Collecting and rolling dice is one of the main pleasures of D&D players and DMs. It's a cornerstone of the gameplay, and a single roll can change the direction of an encounter, session, arc, or even the whole campaign. But a DM that makes you roll for everything is one that hasn't quite got the grasp of the concept of the game outside of a selection of a series of coin flips. If a player is a hulking dragonborn barbarian with 20 strength, they shouldn't have to roll for athletics to pick up a teapot or kick down a shoddy wooden door. A learned and intellectual wizard needn't roll to comprehend some basic arcane runes, and a dexterous thieving rogue wouldn't fumble climbing through a ground floor window. Some of these things just don't need to be rolled for. If a player gives an incredibly convincing, persuasive speech, then forego the check and reward their actions or the way they've built their characters. And in the very worst cases, I've seen this extend to even mundane actions like opening doors. It's just not fun. I've spoken before about the pitfall that is the DMPC. The DM gets to be the world, the environment, the narrator, the NPC, and countless other things in the world. And on the flip side, the party get to participate in that world. DMPCs cross the boundary, and due to these self-serving biases that everyone naturally has, they end up becoming the main character in the eyes of the DM. The party don't need the DM to self-insert into a game, being a guide or the de facto leader of the party. If a DM wants to play a party member, then maybe they should join a game where they aren't the DM. Cameos are important. NPCs are great, an integral part of the game even, but having your character that you made for a game inserted and lead the party is not the mood. You might as well just play single-player D&D in such a case. Of course, NPCs sometimes come along for a quest, but the DM should not play a permanent party member in 99.99% of cases of D&D. Don't be selfish. Red flags can be a quick sign to steer clear of a game, or when one needs some improvement. One of the best ways to improve your games is in making incredible dungeons in 5 easy steps. Check out this video to learn how to do just that. See you next time.